Inafune-san they just announced is now the director of R&D or head of R&D for all of Capcom.
Yeah, for both Japan and American shores.
Right.
He oversees all of it.
Europe, yeah.
And Europe, he sees all of it.
Basically, he's in charge of everything R&D. And we got a really candid interview with him, and it's the kind of stuff that we've been talking about a lot, and we see crop up every now and then about like, where is Japan these days?
Inafune has a huge set of balls, to be able to go out and say, I mean, straight up, some of the things he talked about, admittedly, flat out saying, designers in these Western studios doing things that Japanese would never do or never think of doing in games, and that's really refreshing to see a Japanese developer go out and say it, and not only say it, but work to alleviate that, to work to progress to like some sort of unified game development throughout the company.
Are there any games that have come out there from the Western market that you've looked at and you've said, I wish I made that game?
Yeah, to be honest, I wish we had the ability to create all of the Western titles, because right now the one thing they've got that we don't have is they're not so fixated on the rules. Japanese designers get stuck with how they think games should be. They say, oh, there's a monster and you kill it and you get a certain amount of XP for that, and that's just the way that games are. But one of the things that Western companies are doing right now is they're throwing away all those rules. They're saying, yes, you can kill the main character, you can cut off his finger, you can do things that in Japan we would normally think of as taboo and wouldn't even try to take our creative vision in that direction. And because there are no rules, all bets are off. You can make technically any sort of game that you want. And so recent Western games, every time I play almost every one of them, I'm like, wow, how original, that's so unique. It's amazing the things they're able to do, just because they have the freedom to design anything that they really want and aren't so fixated on the rules. Japan games recently, if you play them, they all feel the same. They all feel like they're made from the same basic ingredients, and the flavor is not very different from one another. So right now, I think that's one of the best things we can learn from the West is just throw out the rules.
あまり必要ないかなって新しい味を味わいたいと思いますね。
Did you imagine that you would end up in this position at Capcom, starting out as an illustrator on a little game called Rockman?
もちろんね。
Of course, when I was the illustrator on Rockman, I was focusing all my energies on that, and it was just the task at hand. So I never imagined that I would be the head of R&D of Capcom. But over the years that I've worked at Capcom, I really have worked my hardest for the company and poured my heart and soul into game design. I think it's probably that hard work that's paid off and got me to the position I am at today.
Why the push towards the global initiative? Is there something about game design in the rest of the world that really appeals to you that you feel the Japanese can learn from? Or is it purely profit motive?
海外のデザインが
It's not really a profit motive, and it's not really that I particularly think that Western design is better than Eastern design or vice versa. It's merely that when you get a variety of staff, ideas, people with different abilities, that's when you can create the most interesting games, I feel. And so actually back in the day when we used to design everything out of headquarters, so all of our ideas were coming from a pool of talented creators that lived in Osaka and were influenced by that culture. But of course, in order to make the best games that appeal to the broadest audience, that truly are global, we needed to borrow from the creative energies of people living in Canada, England, America, France, all of these countries, because they bring something to the table that is very unique to their culture, to their country, to their way of thinking. And so to truly make the most balanced, interesting game experiences, I think it's the different variety of people that you can put on a project that's going to generate that.
Do you think it's easier to bring a very Western game to Japan or to bring a very Japanese game to the Western market?
両方やりにくい。
Yeah, definitely both of those are very daunting, challenging tasks when you think about it. I'd probably say that ultimately the base Japanese design is something that has appealed probably to the Western hardcore gamer market for a long time. The challenge from that point is that once you have the core that's signed off on the basic Japanese game design, you have to spread it to the mass market, and it's getting those other more casual users on board that's kind of sometimes difficult. especially when it comes to Capcom's brands, because they're definitely something that appeal largely to the core gaming audience in the West. Now, on the other side of the ocean in Japan, our biggest problem is that the Japanese gaming market is shrinking, and Japanese gamers in general are kind of narrow-minded when it comes to the sort of games that they like. They appreciate the more Japanese sort of game design and are less likely to appreciate the Western design. And so until that base mindset within both Japanese users and Japanese developers changes to a more global mindset, then it's going to be equally or perhaps even more difficult to sell a Western title in Japan.
I'm curious if this is an initiative that you can take credit for, or if it was an idea that was germinated in the company and you've been a very strong cheerleader for it.
本当に
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing, but actually there's still not a lot of people internally that support this concept, and so I have to constantly be on the front line, be at the top with the megaphone telling everybody this is the way we have to do it for the future of game design. Because basically it's human nature that if a lot of times you leave people to their own vices, then they're going to choose the easier path. And it's easier to go back to that old basic Japanese game design. Trying to work with the West as a Japanese publisher presents a lot of difficult obstacles, and trying to get over those are things that are going to be frustrating for both sides. And so again, unless I'm there constantly prodding people, telling them we really need to do this over and over again, then a lot of our best creators would just naturally fall back into the old ways. So that's one of the difficult things that I have to deal with as the head of R&D.
デベロッパーとも自分が中心となってゲーム作りに参加していくっていう形を取り続けたいと思ってます。
As a head of R&D, it seems like you would have a lot of opportunity to really push a creative vision towards new IP and towards new titles. And Capcom has a lot of legacy for really fantastic titles and sequels and series. And I wonder if you think that there's ever a time where you create a universe and it's time to just put it to bed, you know? Or if once a universe is created, there's always a new story to tell and there's always a new game design to come out of it.
そうですね。
Basically, it's going to focus around what the users want, what the gamers want. There's a lot of creators out there that want to make the franchises that they like, or they want to continue making the franchises that they feel comfortable with. And that's a pretty selfish way of creating games. I'm not saying that creators aren't selfish in their own right, but what you really have to do is think of the gamers and what sort of games they want to play. So as long as the games that they want to play are those older franchises, those older IPs, then they'll always have a place. Of course, Capcom also needs to make original IP as well, because that's something that the users, that the gamers also want us to make. They want new game experiences as well as those old ones that they know and love. And so I think that Capcom needs to pursue both paths. Both continually utilizing old IP that the fans know and love and just don't want to be put to rest, as well as original IP that's going to help us gather new Capcom fans for the future. I think that a lot of companies that once the economy goes bad or whatnot, they start to become more defensive and stick only to sequels. I don't want Capcom to become that. I want it to always have the power and the strength to move forward and have both original IP and the old classic hits as well.
Is there any classic Capcom franchise or character that if you could resurrect, you would? You know, like Bionic Commando Rearmed was a hit for a lot of people. Is there any other games or series that, like, if you could just like snap your fingers and make it happen, you would bring it back?
そうですね。古い IP っていうか。
Yeah, I'd probably have to say just off the top of my head, it would be Mega Man Legends 3. That's something that I have as a personal dream of mine. And every time I mention this discussion to people in the press, they're always like, yes, you should make that.
で欲しいみたいなことをファンにもね、メガマンファンに言われること多いんで、
Just because it's a dream doesn't necessarily mean it comes true. And just because I'm the head of R&D doesn't mean that I get to make it automatically. It's still a company, and I have bosses as well. But if I could make any game just as a personal dream, that would be it.